Hey there guys, in today's video I wanted to talk about how to consider the safety of your bird in light of some common holiday hazards, things that we put into our house or things that we have going on that could potentially be detrimental to your bird, and how you can avoid having anything negative happen. So if that's something you're interested in seeing, make sure to stick around because that's going to be coming up right after this. This is Jack over at Hi Redbird, where I am tirelessly working to find new ways to make the keeping of exotic animals and pets more exciting, more affordable, and ultimately more enjoyable. And in today's video, I wanted to talk about common holiday hazards, things that might be going on in your house that could potentially be detrimental to your bird. Obviously, we all want to avoid anything negative happening, but there are a couple of things that you may have thought about, or a couple of things that you may not have thought about, that just need to be on your radar in terms of things that could potentially be a threat to your bird. So the very first thing that I want to talk about, many of us associate the holidays with lots of delicious food. So the first thing you want to make sure to consider when you are cooking, or if people are cooking around you, is that you are using cookware and things that are going to be safe for your bird. Now, many people are aware that Teflon-coated pans, as they are heated, they release chemicals that are potentially fatal to your birds. And even if you do not have Teflon-coated cookware in your house, if you have people coming over to your space and they are bringing their own cookware to warm something up, that could potentially be a problem as well. So that's something you want to try to avoid. You want to try to avoid overheating most kinds of plastic. That is going to include things like oven bags that are typically used for turkeys. There is a lot of anecdotal evidence that birds do not do well with that as well. Anything that could potentially release fumes like that is going to be something you want to avoid. And the overwhelming problem with these things is that when they are releasing fumes, it is not going to be visible, and it's often not going to have a scent that you can associate with it either. It's not going to be like it's burning. You're not going to see anything charring or flaking away. It can start releasing those fumes before you even get very, very heated. So those are things you want to keep in mind. Now, while we're on the topic of food, you also want to take into consideration what your bird is getting, because a lot of us do like to indulge our birds with some of our holiday foods as well. What you want to remember is that most of those foods are not going to be healthy for your bird, because quite frankly, most of those foods aren't healthy for us. They are going to be loaded with salt, sugar, butter, tons of fat, and so you want to think about the things that your bird is getting. Obviously, there's things like onions, garlic, mushrooms, which can typically be used in either Thanksgiving or Christmas food preparation, but you also want to think about cooked items or prepared items that might have those ingredients in them. So, obviously you wouldn't feed out roasted mushrooms to your bird, but if there's a stuffing that has those mushrooms, that garlic, that is going to be something that you want to avoid. You want to avoid things like dairy, because birds do not have the ability to process lactose. So things heavy in butter, milk, cream, or cheese, those are all going to be things that you want to avoid giving to your bird, because again, they don't really have the ability to process it, and most of those things are going to be very, very high in fat. Now, another thing you want to take into consideration is the size of your bird. Even if you are sharing some bird-safe food items with your animal, you want to make sure that you are sharing an amount that is appropriate for your bird. And there is no be-all, end-all rule when it comes to this. Quite frankly, there can't be, because if someone says that you can give your bird 2 tablespoons of stuffing, well, that might be a great amount for something like a green-winged macaw, but for a budgie, you have effectively given that bird its weight in stuffing. So just make sure you think about how much you are giving your animal in proportion to its body size. Obviously, we don't want to make our animals very, very sick by giving them a ton of treats. Think about things like the fat content, the salt content, and the sugar content of what you are giving them as well. Many of our birds do react very favorably to things that are high in sugar, and fruits are pretty high in sugar, and birds typically like them. But what you want to remember is fruits are not available year-round. There is no tree that produces fruit 24/7 year-round. So fruits are a rare occurrence in the wild. Your bird does not need to be overloaded with super sugary things. Now, while you do have that in mind, you also want to make sure to think about if you are having guests over at your house. You want to make sure that they know what they can and cannot feed your bird. And quite frankly, I would probably put it on the just do not feed. If you have guests coming over, people who do not regularly interact with any birds, but even your bird specifically, I would say just avoid having them interact with feeding that animal. There's other interactions that can happen. They should happen supervised, especially if it is someone who is not comfortable or typically interacts with birds. But the feeding especially can be problematic because holidays are usually a time for celebration. Sometimes people are very, very excited about things but not thinking. So you want to make sure that other people, your guests, are not giving your bird anything that could be problematic. You want to make sure that your guests are not having negative interactions with your bird. If your bird is in its cage, it might be best for people to leave that bird alone. The problem here is, again, if you have people who do not regularly interact with birds, they may not know what they are seeing in terms of an interaction. They may think that your bird is very, very excited to see them because obviously it's puffing up, it's holding out its wings a little bit, it's leaning into them, when realistically, if you have a bird, you know very well that that bird is giving you every sign that it wants you to go away and is about to bite if you do not go away. This can be a great opportunity to introduce people to birds, but again, it should always be supervised and use your best judgment. Sometimes it's probably best that you just leave your bird alone because there can be a lot of chaos going on, and you don't want someone to have a negative interaction with a bird just because your bird is stressed. Now, another thing you want to take into consideration, at the holidays, there are a lot of decorations, things like that. Obviously, you want to make sure that your bird isn't interacting with things that are obviously problematic. That's going to include things like foil tinsel. That's going to include things like Christmas lights, things that could very, very quickly go very wrong. But you also want to make sure that your bird isn't interacting with things that may have you thinking whether or not that is safe. If you have things like live pine branches, you don't necessarily know whether or not those have been treated with any sort of pesticide or any sort of herbicide, fungicide that could be potentially problematic for your bird. You want to make sure that your bird is not getting into cut flowers or anything like that that could also be toxic to your bird. Things like poinsettias and lilies are very, very common in the holidays, and those plants are going to be toxic to your bird. So those are things that you want to think about to try to avoid. Now, I know all of this can seem a little bit daunting, and it can almost make it seem like I'm saying your bird has to stay locked in its cage until after the holiday season. But just like with every other thing that is in our homes, there's calls that you need to make. You need to decide what is safe, what's not safe. There's things you can do to make it safer. And one of the best things you can do is just to supervise your bird. So if you have a lavishly decorated home for the holidays, you can bring your bird into that area. You just want to make sure that you supervise their interactions with everything. And if they are interacting with people, especially if those people don't regularly interact with birds, you want to make sure that you supervise those interactions as well. But this is a wonderful season. There's a lot of things going on, and it's a great way to introduce your bird to new things. So the holiday season can be a wonderful form of enrichment. So don't be disheartened, but there is a little bit of work to do things safely. So I definitely encourage you guys to just take a look around and see what you can do to make your area safer. If you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead, give it a thumbs up. I'm always working to put together new content that is useful for you guys. I certainly hope that this video has helped you take into consideration various hazards that are potentially around your home in the holiday season. I do want to thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time. I do need to say thank you to my Patreon patrons for helping to make these videos possible. You can find out more by visiting Hi Red Bird on Patreon or clicking the link in the description section down below if you would like more information. Thanks!